Alright, so now we are on to section 1-3 and workshop number 2, driving tour principles and embellishments. And this kind of gets into the little bits and pieces of day-to-day being an expedition leader and the stuff that comes up. And so hopefully as we go through this will get into the nitty-gritty of how you're going to do your job and be successful. Let's get started. Number 1, protect your passengers. A lot of what's covered in this slide we've already talked about a fair bit, but we'll go through it again. Memorize the rules of the road. Again, we're professional drivers. We're required to know what the rules of the road are and to obey them. And we always just want to take the high road. We don't want to succumb to road rage. You're going to be spending a lot of time out on the road in this job, and you're going to come across a lot of other drivers who won't necessarily be behaving well, and they often will get frustrated with you because you're driving a big vehicle, you're going slower. Don't ever let them get to you. You have no control over what other drivers do. What you do have control over is how you drive, how you behave, and how you react to those people. And so that's all you have control over. Keep that in mind, and don't let yourself get drawn into road rage. And just obey the rules. Don't speed. We've already talked about that. Never speed. A lot of people assume that they'll never get pulled over if the speed limit's 55. They can go 5-10 miles per hour of the speed limit. While that may be true, in practice, the reality is if you're a single mile an hour over the speed limit, you can be pulled over, and our company policy is that you don't speed. In addition to just the legality of it, there's the perception that your passengers have of the experience they're having, and are you a safe driver? And if you speed, people are gonna get anxious about your driving. So don't do that. Use common sense when parking and disembarking. Be respectful of other cars, other vehicles, other buses. In many cases, we're parking in areas where there's other tour buses. It can get pretty backed up. Up in Yosemite, the parking lot in front of the lodge, the parking lot at Muir Woods. So try to work with other tour guides, even if they don't always necessarily work with you. And just do your best to be a good ambassador for Exonomical Tours. And also that represents well to your passengers. And when you're behaving legally and in a respectful way, that presents you as a professional to your passengers. So use common sense when you're parking and disembarking, always keeping the safety of your passengers in mind. And don't let the passengers open the side door in the vans. You want to get out and open it for them. It's polite, but it's also, that gives you the opportunity to go around and check the traffic where they're getting out. And also, we've had little situations where people have gotten their fingers caught in the door. That's more often when it's closing, but that sort of thing. So you can prevent all that. Get out, open the door in the vans. In buses, caution passengers to pay attention to traffic as they disembark. I've already talked about that. Talked about some other strategies for keeping them safe as they disembark. This becomes particularly important at the end of a wine tour when people have been drinking all day. And so in addition to simply putting people in a dangerous situation by having them disembarking the vehicle on the traffic side, you've now got people whose judgment is impaired by the fact that they've had alcohol all day. So that just adds another element of complexity of the situation. So just be super cautious. Do everything you can to protect your passengers as they're getting on and off the bus. Help the passengers in and out. More so in the vans. You can offer your hand to women getting out of the bus, elderly people. A lot of people appreciate that. Remind people to take their belongings at the end of the trip. I already talked a little bit about that, but it's worth reiterating that it's best for you if they take all their items with them. You don't want to have to find cell phones and clothing and all that, and then deal with having to get it back to them. So give them a reminder to have a look around and grab all their stuff. And then in the beginning of the day and also periodically throughout the day, you're going to want to announce to the passengers that they need to wear their seatbelts. While California law doesn't require bus passengers, and the vans are included in this, to wear their seatbelts, the driver of course, always has to wear their seatbelts. If you're in a vehicle that has a passenger seat to the right of you, they are considered in the driving area, and they are required by law to wear their seatbelts. People in the passenger section, behind the driver, aren't legally required to, but our company policy is that we do ask them to wear their seatbelts. So please ask them to do so. Number 2, protect yourself. You want to be at your best on your tours. That's going to give our customers the best possible experience. And of course, when you're at your best and you're giving a great tour, that's when you're going to earn your best money. So in order to do that, you definitely want to try to get enough sleep. You've got some pretty long days, so try to catch up on sleep and sleep enough the night before your tour. Eat well. Keep yourself fed. Take care of yourself, getting enough rest, exercise, etc., so that on your days where you're working, you're, again, just bringing your A game. Your passengers need you to get them home safely. And so rest is the most important one, especially on these Yosemite trips, but really on any tour. The owner, Rodrigo, has an interesting saying, an analogy that is relevant. He says that surgeons have one person's life in their hands when they're at work. As tour guides, expedition leaders, we can have up to 41 people's lives in our hands on a given day. And so safety is the utmost. As we've already talked about, safety is our first priority. And part of being safe is to be well rested, so that you're at your best. So protect yourself. Number 3, protect your vehicle. Again, we've talked about this a little bit in previous sections, but do your inspections every single day. Make sure your vehicle is safe and in good condition. If you find oil or any of the other fluids a little bit low, often the driver's cleaning area, and we'll show you where that is when we do the warehouse tour, there is extra engine oil, extra transmission fluid, coolant, and so you can top off your fluids if they seem a little bit low. When you're driving over the course of any day, you want to pay attention to the performance of the vehicle. You want to listen carefully. If you feel something unusual, if you hear something unusual from the vehicle, report it as soon as you can. Try to figure out what it might be, but also just report it. We've had numerous potential hazards averted by expedition leaders reporting a noise that they heard and or perhaps an experience that they had, and that allowed then the mechanic to troubleshoot a potential issue and do preventive maintenance so that issue didn't occur, creating a breakdown or something, or a safety hazard. So always be mindful of your vehicle, and use that mechanics@extronomical.com email address to report things that you think need attention. We will always do our best to address issues that come up as much as possible. And but you're our eyes and ears out on the road, and you're the ones that are in the vehicles most, and you're going to get to know each vehicle. You're going to know how it should sound, how it should feel, and when you experience something unusual, that usually does mean there's something wrong, and so let us know. When you're parking, particularly in the city, but just really anywhere, check signs, street cleaning signs, no parking zones. Make sure you're parking in a safe, legal spot. Again, we've already talked a little bit about that. But just remember that parking tickets are your responsibility, and so pay attention to that. Protect your vehicle. Before we go on to number 4, in addition to number 3, protect your vehicle, I didn't mention that it is our company policy, Extronomical's company policy, that you use engine braking. And as a commercial driver, this is something you need to get to know, is how to use engine braking, and it's a little bit different in different vehicles. Every vehicle that we have, vans, luxury vans, buses, they all have an overdrive function, and we can talk more about learning to use the overdrive function properly. Use your gears, downshift. The buses typically, the diesel vehicles and buses typically have an exhaust braking system as well. And these are the tools you can use to not wear out your brakes. And why that's so important is that in the city, you're going up and down quite a few steep hills, you're stopping and going. We need those brakes to be in good condition. The brake systems we have on these big buses in particular, but even the vans, while they are bigger than a standard car, they're dealing with a lot of weight and a lot of use, and so we want to keep them in good condition. And one of the best things we can do to do that is to use our engine braking. And areas that's particularly important, steep hills in the city. If you're coming down steep hills, you'll want to downshift early. It won't necessarily destroy the transmission if you downshift at speed, but it's best to slow down a bit before you're downshifting so that the RPMs are a little bit lower. And depending on the steepness of the hill, you might drop down to third, second, even first on a really steep hill, and that prevents you from abusing your brakes. And then on long downhill stretches, the one that comes to mind is coming out of Yosemite National Park at the end of your tour. Those long stretches of downhill, and on the less steep stretches you can use the overdrive, and that'll give you a little bit of engine braking so you're not constantly stepping on your brakes. And then on the steeper sections you can drop down into third, maybe even into second in the vans. You want to watch your RPMs. You don't want to let your RPMs get too high, but you definitely want to use that engine braking. In some of the buses, the new Freightliner that we've acquired has the best engine braking is actually the exhaust braking button. So we'll familiarize you with a little bit more with those as we familiarize you with the vehicles. But always use your engine braking. What happens with brakes, particularly on those long stretches, is if you're constantly just using your brakes, you're going to heat those brake pads up. And when they get too hot, they become less effective. They don't work as well, which puts you and your passengers in danger. And it wears them out more quickly. And they can get warped, the rotors can get damaged, and that becomes a very expensive repair job. Where if we're using our brakes properly and maintaining them and replacing the pads regularly, it's pretty simple and inexpensive to do so. So just make sure to use your engine braking. Going on to number 4, help out your buddies. Always be thinking about all your colleagues here at Xtronomical, and potentially even other tour companies. Try to be a team player. Clean your vehicle out after every tour. We've already talked about that, what your responsibilities are there. Keep an eye out for each other. Even out on the road, sometimes you may see safety situations or traffic situations, and you may know that one of your colleagues is out there. You can give them a ring, give them a call, and let them know. So always be thinking about the well-being of your fellow expedition leaders as you conduct your day. Keep the other expedition leaders' phone numbers in your cell phone. We'll have an opportunity to acquire the phone numbers for all the other expedition leaders so that you can call them. That also, in the early days when you're learning the job, they can be a good resource to answer questions if the training manager or the operations manager is not available, and they can teach you a lot of the strategies they use to be successful. So there's lots of opportunities to help out your fellow tour guides and expedition leaders. Keep that in mind. And that is helping out your buddies. Number 5, protect your tips. Most people consider this pretty important. Be a good, friendly, helpful, entertaining guide, and that will get you better tips. And remember when you're out there that you are the face of the company, so be an ambassador for the company. That's regarding your passengers, always be professional, and just people that you come in contact with. And remember that everything you do when you're driving, when you're out there, you've got an audience, and so you want to maintain professional behavior at all times, because you've got a group of people in your vehicle that are watching you, and they're assessing you, and they're evaluating you, and part of their experience is going to be your performance, and part of their assessment of your performance is going to be your professionalism, how you drive, how you interact with them, etc. And perhaps the most important thing you can do in trying to achieve our company mission and in trying to be a good tour guide, good expedition leader, you're creating an experience. You're curating an experience for them over the course of the day, and they're seeing some amazing things. They're experiencing some amazing things. They're hearing a lot of history and commentary from you. Beyond that, just your personality. We want your personality to come out. We don't want you to be too much of a cookie cutter. We give you scripts for the tours. We train you, and that's meant as a starting point. We want you to respect the tour narrative that we've given you, but at the same time, you're going to acquire your additional knowledge. You're going to put your own spin on things, and we want that personality to come out. That's part of what we are as a company and who you are. So keep that in mind. And one thing that will definitely improve your ability to create a positive experience and a memorable experience, and will also allow you to up the ante on your tips, is to connect with your passengers. Take over the course of any day, even in a bus, try to have an opportunity to interact with your passengers. Don't get out at the stops, go talk to them, find out where they're from, spend a little FaceTime with them, and that will connect you better with them. And when you connect better with them, that gives them a better feeling, and that usually results in better tips. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Number 6, protect your bonus. As an expedition leader, you qualify for a daily completion bonus. We should have already talked about that, but in a bus, you get a bonus based on the number of passengers over the number 13. That's a per head bonus over 13. In the vans, you get a percentage of your pay in addition. It's called the completion bonus, and you qualify for it as long as you've successfully completed the tour. And there's a number of ways we measure if you were successful or not. If you didn't have any breakdowns that were your fault, if you didn't have any serious passenger issues, etc. And so you also qualify at the end of the year. The owner generally gives everybody that's completed a full year a bonus. On top of the daily bonuses, there's an annual bonus, and he just wants to reward your performance and your loyalty for sticking it around and for doing a good job. And he takes into account, when he decides how much he's going to offer you in that bonus, he takes into account a number of different things. Some of the things he takes into account are how good of a driver you've been, how good of an expedition leader you've been. Have you not had tickets? Have you not had accidents, things like that? Are you law-abiding? Are you following the rules out on the road? Are you following our company rules? Or you have the opportunity to sell our other tours when you've got your passengers on board. We have other tours we offer, and you can collect a commission, or you can get a commission paid to you on your check. When you sell other tours to your current passengers, you'll get a percentage of that, so you can make some extra money. And when you're doing that, you're increasing company revenue. That will be taken into account at the end of the year for your bonus. Work with the operations manager. Volunteer for tough shifts when you're asked. We often have scenarios as much as the scheduling. We try to keep it as consistent as possible. The nature of our business makes that very difficult, and so your schedule will be shifting around a bit here and there, and oftentimes the operations manager may need you on a day that you were scheduled off, may need you to do a rescue, and so the more available you are for those extra requests, that will also be taken into account when it comes bonus time. And then when you're out there on the road, or whether it's on tour or on your own, discover new wineries, make new connections, good rest stops, gas stations, etc. Communicate these sorts of bits of information back to us. That's always helpful for us to have new information that can improve our customer experience and our expedition leader experience. So keep that in mind as you're out there, and that will allow you to maximize your bonus. Number 7, protect our reputation and permissions. And much of this we've already covered in previous sections, but of course it bears repeating. Treat the winery staff like friends. Get to know them. Develop good relationships with the people working at the winery staffs, the wineries and other places we visit. Promote their wines and encourage sales. The more wine they sell to our passengers, the more likely you'll get free wine, and it promotes a good relationship, and that's what we rely on for our business. And it's good for you as well. When you walk into a winery and your passengers see that you know these people well and that they like you, that just adds to the overall experience and makes them feel that you're a seasoned professional. And these wineries, in the case of the wine tours, they're in the business to sell wine. So the more you can do to help them sell wine without pushing it too hard on your passengers, the better they're going to do, and that reflects well on us. We've already talked about following other parking and speed regulations in the national parks, Yosemite and Muir Woods, and it's just worth repeating that that's incredibly important, because if we don't, we actually jeopardize, beyond just the possibility of getting a ticket or a citation, it's actually our permission to operate within those parks can be jeopardized if our guides, our expedition leaders, are not behaving appropriately. Never drop off passengers or park in unauthorized locations. On occasion, this can be challenging, but you have to do your very best to avoid pulling up and parking in unsafe or unauthorized or illegal situations. We again remember that you're driving a vehicle that basically has a huge banner for our company on the side, and so your behavior out on the road and your driving behavior, etc., in addition to your passengers witnessing everything you do, people out on the road, if they see that you're driving poorly, they can just call the number that's listed right on the side of the bus and register a complaint. And so again, it goes back to being a good ambassador and holding yourself to a high standard, taking the high road. And so keep that in mind as you're parking as well as driving around the city and the parks, etc. Watch your speed in Yosemite National Park. That's another one that they're very sensitive about. So never speed, and be mindful, particularly of the speed limits in Yosemite. And always have your logbook up to date as much as possible in case your vehicle is inspected, because it can be inspected at any time. Number 8, use the transmission as your brakes. This is another one we've talked about quite a bit already, but we'll go through it again. To slow down on hills, use the transmission. Simply downshift anytime your momentum is requiring you to brake while going down a hill. If you need to downshift, or if you need to downshift rather than use the brakes extensively, as we already talked about, overusing the brakes, particularly on those long stretches of downhill, it warps the pads, it can destroy the rotors, can be very dangerous. So our company policy and our preference is that you always use the engine braking. We've already talked about it a little bit. We'll later in the training can discuss a little bit more about how to effectively engine brake and whether you use overdrive or your downshifting or your exhaust brake system if the vehicle has one. When you do brake, pump the brake. ABS, automatic braking systems, take care of the emergency situations, but it's not smart enough to grab your leg or pull it off. And the brake pedal, or the gas pedal, when you're riding it for a long downhill. So if you're braking on downhill, it only takes about 15 seconds of constant pressure for those brake pads to really heat up. So basically you just want to use the brakes for 5 to 10 seconds just to get yourself slowed down to the speed you need, and then release them for a little while, let them cool off, and then pump them again. And using that method you can control your speed to a certain extent, but then at a certain point you're going to want to downshift and again use your engine braking. So there you go. Number 9. This goes back to the first of the commandments, but we're going to say it again. Above all other things, think safety first. That is absolutely our first priority. You're going to hear it again and again. It's our first priority. So a few minutes late to a pickup or a drop-off is preferred to driving or creating conditions that are dangerous. And just keep that in mind. It's very easy. If you've got a tough pickup schedule, One of your passengers might have been late, you got a late start, you're behind schedule, you're getting a little bit stressed out because you know you're not going to make all your pickups on time. And of course, when you arrive late to pickups, that gets you off to the wrong start with your passengers. You know, people don't like it when you're behind schedule. So it's pretty easy to get in the state of mind where you're in a hurry, and you may start your driving and your decisions as you're driving um, may be subjected to less concern for safety. Don't let that happen. It's always better to be late than to drive in a way that might create a safety hazard. So safety first, safety first, safety first. Number 10, watch for weather, road, and environmental conditions. We'll get you the phone number for the Yosemite National Park Service. There's a phone number you can call where you can update yourself on weather and road conditions in Yosemite. And it's important every day to do that, especially in the times of year where the weather can change rapidly. Obey speed laws, drive slow, do everything slow. A lot of the scenarios we come across, the collisions we have, the accidents we have, tend to happen when people are going too fast or in reverse. So everything you do, slow it down. Try to go in slow motion compared to what you would do in your personal vehicle. The slower you're going, the less damage you're going to do if you do get into some sort of collision. Also remember that in a bus and a van, you need more room to stop. It takes longer to brake than in a passenger car, and you're full of passengers. So it can be frustrating when you're on a crowded highway and you're trying to leave a safe distance between you and the car in front of you, and someone continues to cut in front of you. But really, it comes down to safety. As we said in the last slide, and we'll say it again, the most important part of your job is safety. You have the lives of people in your hands, so don't risk those lives. Don't risk your life. Heavy rain, snow, heavy fog, sun in your eyes, road construction, potholes, those are all the sorts of conditions you need to be constantly scanning the environment for. And so always keep that in mind. Try to know the weather and the road conditions before you start your tour. It's always a good thing when you can tell your passengers what the expected weather report will be. That again goes to just being a professional, presenting yourself as a professional guide, and enhancing the tour experience. So that's number 10. Number 11, driving the van or minibus is more difficult than driving a regular car. Vans and big buses especially need a lot more time and room to maneuver. That sort of goes without saying. It takes a lot longer to slow down or come to a stop. Braking takes more time. And so you want to constantly be scanning your environment. You want to know what's in front of you, what's on either side of you, and what's behind you at all times. You also want to know, you want to be looking out in front of you, pretty far out in front of you, whether it's in city driving, highway driving, country driving. You want to be paying attention not just what's directly in front of you, but pretty far out in front of you, because of that reaction time. Let's say driving down a road and a big bus or a big truck is parked off to the side of the road, but it's partially blocking your lane, and you're cruising along. You've got cars just to the left of you in the next lane over. You're going to want to know what's coming early on so that you have time to either come to a stop if necessary, or to get safely into the next lane so that you can go past that vehicle. So watching for obstacles and you're coming up in your path and keeping your eyes open pretty far ahead of you is going to be really important, and is going to keep you safe. Making sure, again, we've already talked about it, leaving a safe distance between you and the vehicle in front of you is huge. You're also going to want to make your mirrors your best friend. Check your mirrors constantly. It's almost as important to know what's going on behind you as it is in front of you and to the sides of you. You always want to be aware of if there are vehicles beside you, but you also want to know what's going on behind you. All the vehicles, in addition to the side mirrors, many of the vehicles, the buses particularly, but also the luxury vans, have reverse cameras, and the combination of those mirrors and the reverse cameras, once you're used to using them, is going to really help you know what's going on next to you and behind you. And those are your big blind spots, especially right behind you. In the vans, we've got little sensors that tell you when you're getting too close to something. Um, a good rule of thumb is that if at any given time, if someone were to ask you what type of car and what color is behind you on either side or on either side of you, you'd be able to answer that question without checking your mirrors. That's how aware you want to be of what's going on behind you, because what's going on behind you can be equally as important to your safety as what's going on in front of you. So again, keep a nice safe distance between you and the vehicle in front of you, and just be super cautious, scan your environment, and always be paying attention to what's going on in all directions. Number 12, snow chains must always be in the vehicle when visiting Yosemite. On the Yosemite tours, snow can occur almost any time of year. Generally not in summertime, but it can. We've had snow as late as June and as early as September. So you always want to have snow chains in the vehicles. We try to keep the vehicle stocked with 2 sets of chains. So you've got a backup set. We're going to want to make sure that you know how to put chains on properly to both the buses and the vans. We have a video that we'll have you watch, and we can also, if you don't feel confident before you ever get to that time of year where you have to put chains on, we can set a time for one of the staff or managers to show you how to put chains on. You're going to want to know how to do it before you get up there and try, because it's a lot easier to learn how to do it in a nice, clean, warm environment like the warehouse versus trying to figure out how to do it in this snow. But when you're doing your inspections in the colder part of the year, when there's snow up in Yosemite, you'll definitely want to include checking for those snow chains and checking that they're in good working order. The routing of the Yosemite tour adjusts once snow occurs up in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Our normal route into Yosemite is Highway 120, which comes into the park from sort of the northwest. That road, which goes over the summit, gets closed at a certain point in the year. It's different every year, just depending on how early or late the snow comes and how much snow comes. It can reopen at times during the winter if conditions are appropriate, but usually it's in late October, early November that the weather begins to change, and so our route will ultimately change. And in the fall and spring, there's often a few weeks to even a month or more where the route we take will change day by day depending on if the road is open or not and if snow chains are required. And ultimately the manager on duty will make the decision as to which route you're going to take. And then once they've closed Highway 120 for good, we take Highway 140 in the wintertime, which means once that happens, we're not able to include the hike to the giant sequoia trees on our tour, and that can often cause a little friction between the passengers and yourself. They may not have been made aware. We do our best to make people aware that in winter and when snow arrives, we're not able to do that hike, but people will not get that message and might express some frustration about that, and it's up to you to use your diplomatic skills to finesse that situation and help them understand that weather is out of our control, and we do spend whatever time is not spent at the Tuolumne Grove and the giant sequoias. We spend that extra time in the valley. So the upside of them not going to the giant sequoias at that time of year is that they spend that extra time in the valley. They get a longer period of time in the valley. So that's hopefully one way to help you sell that to them. So you'll want to, I mentioned her before, but you'll want to call the number for Yosemite, especially as we get into that time of year, to find out what the road conditions are, what the weather's going to be, and that will help you know which way we're going to go. But ultimately, it will be, generally you'll get a message as to which route we're taking. And then once wintertime is here and the snow has fallen, um, pretty much Highway 140, which comes into Yosemite from the southwest, is our preferred route in. That also affects the stops we make. In the warmer part of the year, when we're taking Highway 120, our standard halfway stop is at Oakdale, at the Rayleigh's Oakdale Market, and that's where you gas up and you let your passengers off. Versus the Highway 140 route, our typical stop is the Safeway at Turlock, and the exit in Turlock that you're going to take there is called Monte Vista. But you'll want to make sure that if you're hired in the warmer part of the year, that if hopefully we will do this, but you'll want to make sure that once the weather changes, we've trained you on the winter route, the Highway 140 route, and where to stop, and vice versa. If you're hired in the colder part of the year and we're taking Highway 140 into Yosemite, you'll want to make sure that when the season changes, you prompt us to make sure that we're training you on the Highway 120 route, the summer route. So those are important things to remember. Passengers must remain in the vehicle while installing snow chains, unless you're in a very safe area that's off to the side of the road, and is very safe for your passengers. And in that case, it's okay to let the passengers off the vehicle. But typically, you want to keep your passengers in the vehicle while you're installing your snow chains, and you don't generally want to allow your passengers to help you put on snow chains. Sometimes they'll offer. There's safety concerns there, so you don't want to do that. And when you're putting chains on, you want to make sure you're safe. We have jackets, bright yellow jackets, astronomical jackets that you can use that make you very visible, keep you warm, keep you dry. But watch out for other vehicles, make sure you're protected. The company will reimburse you up to $75 if you want to purchase some rain gear so that you don't get wet, because you'll get dirty and wet when you're putting on chains. And get yourself a nice pair of pretty thick. You don't want to get gloves that are too thick. You want to get these nice thick rubber gloves that still allow you pretty good dexterity. But if your fingers get cold while you're putting on the chains, that's going to be difficult. So buy some rain gear. We'll reimburse you up to $75 and get yourself some good gloves for the winter time. Number 13, pickups, drop-offs, gas stations, passenger safety, and accidents, which we prefer to call accidents, collisions, because they're not really accidents. Most of our collisions occur during pickups and drop-offs. Please remember that the city is a very unpredictable place. Always scan your surroundings for potential hazards. Take your time making moves and changing lanes. Do it slowly. Do not read your pickup list or any directions while you're driving. And watch out for lane drift while talking to your passengers. It's easy to lose track of what you're doing when you're distracted by passengers or your pickup list and drift into another lane. Speeding or sudden moves won't save you time and will lead to costly results. They'll lead to collisions. When driving the luxury vans and the buses, remember that you're driving a large vehicle that's taller, wider, and longer than regular cars. And you need more room to maneuver, you need more time to maneuver. Do not pull the buses or luxury vans into hotels without checking your clearance. Some of the hotels have entry courts that have a roof over them, and so make sure you've got lots of clearance before you do that. The minibuses are so long, and in fact they have the distance between the rear wheels and the back of the bus is quite long, and that causes something we call the dragon tail. And what happens with the dragon tail is that when you turn left, the back right corner of your vehicle swings out pretty far to the right, and that creates problems. If you're pulling up to pick up or drop off a passenger at a hotel, you can potentially If you pull up too close, you've got your passengers on board. When you're pulling out, usually your attention is on the left side of the vehicle and who's coming along from behind you, and you're trying to safely enter traffic from there. And so you often forget that as you're pulling out, as you turn left, and sometimes you're pressed for time, so you're giving it a fair amount of gas, but the rear side of your vehicle at the back is going to swing out. It is going to cross over the sidewalk and could conceivably hit a tree, hit a parking meter, or hit a person that's standing on the edge of the sidewalk. And almost every one of our expedition leaders ends up having what we call a dragon tail incident. A lot of times there are overhangs, maybe a tree with a branch that's hanging over, or a light, and so we're off to the right or passenger side of your vehicle. It may look clear at ground level, but when you make your turn out into traffic, the dragon tail up at the top of the vehicle may actually hit a tree, a branch of a tree, or something like that. So you really want to be very aware of the back of your vehicle and get very used to how much room you need to make your turns. Take them slow. The slower you're going, the less damage you're going to do to yourself and the vehicle and anything else. And just be aware of what's behind you, so that you don't inadvertently hit something with the back of your vehicle. The dragon tail also comes into play in a couple other instances when you're making turns, particularly in the city. You're making turns at busy intersections. You need to make nice wide turns, and we've had collisions occur with some of our drivers where taxis or other cars are coming around, sometimes making illegal turns or sometimes legal, but they don't realize that the bus is going to swing out, and we've had collisions occur as a result of that. So you need to, as you're making your turns, know what's at your back corners as you make those turns, so that you're aware of any cars in your blind spot and whether the dragon tail is going to hit one of those cars. And then finally, on steep hills, of which of course there are many in San Francisco, there's certain hills you just don't want to go up or down in the buses. Particularly Nob Hill, there are only a few streets that you can get onto and off of Nob Hill in those buses. Most of the streets, including Mason, Taylor, and Jones, are just too steep. And what happens as you get to the bottom of a steep hill is that the angle of the hill, when it gets to the flat portion of the intersection, is such that the back of the bus and the tailpipe in the back of the bus can actually scrape the ground, and in some cases even get stuck if it's a steep enough hill. And so keep that in mind. Just get very comfortable with the dragon tail, with the fact that these big vehicles need wider turns, and you need to make sure you've got a lot of clearance. Another good thing to do as you are coming up to an intersection in the city and you need to make a turn, Muni drivers are trained to do this. It may be, even though you may frustrate some drivers behind you, it may make sense as you're coming up to make a right turn at an intersection to take up 2 lanes so that you have plenty of clearance as you make your wide turn, so that cars don't come in too close to you as you're making that turn. Also, when you're filling up at gas stations, watch out for other vehicles and the barriers. Gas stations tend to have posts that protect the gas tanks from collisions. So when you're fueling the bus, just be very cautious. Don't try to get too tricky with your maneuvering of the vehicle into the gas station. Try not to reverse into spaces. Try to come forward into spaces. Use your mirrors. Use your rear view cameras. People get injured in accidents in the city. You've got so much going on. You've got bicyclists, you've got pedestrians, you've got cars, you've got buses, you've got trucks. There's a lot going on, so just be cautious, take things slow, and be aware of your surroundings. And remember, in the buses, in the luxury vans, the dragon tail, there's a lot of potential problems with that.